The references for this section include EM 385-1-1, Section 5, 29 CFR 1910.132 through 138, Subpart I, and 29 CFR 1926.95 through 107, Subpart E. The use of personal protective and safety equipment, PPE, is a control measure that is to be used only after a hazard evaluation identifies hazards associated with a particular job or activity, and it is determined that the hazards cannot be eliminated and/or controlled to an acceptable level through engineering design or administrative actions. Based on hazard evaluations conducted by supervisors, employers shall identify and select, and each affected employee shall use PPE that will provide appropriate protection. Hazards identified in the development of activity hazard analysis shall have appropriate controls, including PPE, identified to mitigate the hazard. Employers shall communicate PPE decisions to each affected employee during employee orientation and work preparatory meetings. Employees shall use all PPE that may be required to maintain their exposure within acceptable limits. Ensuring the greatest possible protection for employees requires cooperative efforts of both employers and employees. For the employer, they shall perform workplace hazard analysis, identify and provide proper PPE, train employees on the use and care of PPE, maintain PPE and replace when worn or damaged, repair or replace as necessary, and review, update, and evaluate the PPE program. Employees are expected to properly wear PPE, attend PPE training, care for cleaning and maintaining PPE, and inform their supervisor on the need to repair or replace PPE. Employees shall be appropriately trained in the use, care, and limitations of all required PPE. Employees shall demonstrate an understanding of the following aspects of PPE before use: selection, donning, doffing, and adjusting their PPE, limitations and the useful life of the PPE, inspection and testing, and finally, proper care, which includes maintenance, storage, and disposal. Employers shall retrain employees that do not have the understanding or skill required for the use of the PPE. The employer shall verify through written certification that each affected employee has received and understood the training. The written certification shall identify the name of each employee trained, the date or dates of the training, and the subjects taught. A copy of the manufacturer's use, inspection, testing, and maintenance instructions shall be maintained at the job site and be readily available to personnel using the PPE and safety equipment. PPE shall be tested, inspected, and maintained in a serviceable and sanitary condition. Defective or damaged equipment shall not be used. Previously used PPE must be cleaned, inspected, and repaired as necessary before reissue. When employees provide their own PPE, the employer is responsible for assuring its adequacy and protecting against the hazard and its state of repair. In accordance with 29 CFR 1910.132 H6, the employer shall not require an employee to provide or pay for his or her own PPE, except for non-specialty safety toe protective footwear, everyday clothing, or other clothing used solely for the protection from weather. Employees shall wear clothing suitable for the weather and work conditions. At a minimum, this shall be short sleeve shirt, long pants, excessively long or baggy pants are prohibited, and leather or other protective shoes or boots. Protective equipment shall be of heat, fire, chemical, and/or electrical resistive material when conditions require protection against such hazards. Protective leg chaps shall be worn by workers who operate chainsaws. Protective leg chaps shall meet the specifications in American Society for Testing and Materials, or ASTM, Standard F 1897. Persons shall be provided with eye and face protection for the specific job site hazards, as listed in Table 5.1, when machines or operations present potential eye hazards. Eye and face protection shall meet American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, Z87.1 and bear a legible and permanent Z87 logo. When eye protection is required, persons whose vision requires the use of corrective lenses, whether via use of contact lenses or eyeglasses, shall be protected by one of the following: prescription safety glasses, protective glasses with side shields designed to fit over corrective lenses without disturbing the adjustment of the glasses, goggles worn over corrective spectacles without disturbing the adjustment of the spectacles, goggles that incorporate corrective lenses mounted behind the protective lenses. Personnel who are considered blind in one eye and are working in other than administrative functions shall wear safety glasses with side shields at all times. Operations which require eye protection include use of or exposure to hot or molten substances, handling of harmful materials, radiant energy, and exposure to ultraviolet light, where glare-resistant glasses shall comply with ANSI Z80.3. Some common types of eye and face protection include safety spectacles. These have safety frames constructed of metal or plastic and impact-resistant lenses. Side shields are available on some models. Goggles, which are tight-fitting eye protection that completely cover the eyes, eye sockets, and the facial area immediately surrounding the eyes and provide protection from impact, dust, and splashes. Some goggles will fit over corrective lenses. Laser safety goggles. These protect against intense concentrations of light produced by lasers. The type of laser safety goggles an employer chooses will depend upon the equipment and operating conditions in the workplace. Welding shields. These are constructed of vulcanized fiber or fiberglass and are fitted with a filtered lens. Welding shields protect eyes from burns caused by infrared or intense radiant light. They also protect both the eyes and the face from flying sparks, metal spatter, and slag chips produced during welding, brazing, soldering, and cutting operations. Face shields are transparent sheets of plastic that extend from the eyebrows to below the chin and across the entire width of the employee's head. Face shields protect against nuisance dusts and potential splashes or sprays of hazardous liquids, but will not provide adequate protection against impact hazards. The employer shall evaluate the workplace for noise hazards initially and regularly during the course of work. When noise hazards are known or expected, the employer shall develop a hearing conservation program, which can be seen in Section 05.C.05, that include identification and assessment of noise hazards and the measure to be taken to protect personnel against them. Contractor programs shall comply with American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists, or ACGIH, threshold limit values, or TLVs, and EM 385-1-1. Noise measurements shall be made whenever there is difficulty in communicating at distances greater than 2 feet, upon worker complaint of excessive noise, or whenever hazardous noise levels are suspected. Noise assessments and/or measurements shall be performed and documented when any new facility or new equipment is placed into service, and when areas that in the past were not noise hazardous become noise hazardous for any reason. Instruments used to measure noise shall, for continuous noise and impact noise, the instrument settings shall be in accordance with Table 5-3. Dosimeters shall measure the entire employee's work shift to be considered full shift sampling. Calibration of noise measuring equipment shall be in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. Exposure standards without effective hearing protection devices include 140 decibels for impact or impulse noise, and 85 decibels for continuous or steady state noise. Contractor personnel shall comply with ACGIH TLV continuous noise exposure standards as found in Table 5-4. Practical engineering or administrative controls shall be considered and implemented when personnel exposed to continuous sound pressure levels exceed 84 decibels. Engineering controls include lubrication, isolation, damping, baffles, or other methods, and administrative controls include signage, restrict or limit access, or operating time limits. Hearing protection devices shall provide for attenuation of noise to acceptable levels. Dual hearing protection shall be based on the attenuation of specific hearing protection. Double hearing protection should be used whenever noise levels exceed 115 decibels. Earplugs and muffs are rated with a noise reduction rating, or NRR, and the NRR must be marked on the product package. New in the 2014 edition, all contractors who expose employees to noise greater than 85 decibels continuously or 140 decibels on impact or impulse noise shall have a written hearing conservation program as part of their accident prevention plan, which includes a written program on the identification, documentation, engineering controls, PPE, and hearing testing for all employees, employee training on the hazards of noise and the methods of protection provided, labeling of all noise hazardous equipment and areas, pre-employment and end-of-employment hearing testing of individuals who will be working in noise hazardous environments greater than 30 days a year for the contractor. All persons working in or visiting hard hat areas shall be provided with and required to wear Type 1 or Type 2 Class G or Class E headgear. Class G for general is for conditions where the exposure is not to exceed 2,200 volts. Class E for electrical is where the exposure is not to exceed 20,000 volts. Emergency response operations and other activities with greater need for side impact protection, Type 2 head protection is required. Class C hard hats are prohibited in accordance with this manual. Hard hat areas or activities are those areas with potential hazard to head injury. In general, all construction areas are considered hard hat areas. Points of entry to a hard hat area shall have a sign warning of the requirement to wear hard hats. All protective headgear shall meet the requirements of American National Standards Institute, ANSI Z89.1. There shall be no modification to the shell or suspension. A new allowance in the 2014 edition is that stickers are allowed on hard hats provided that the stickers do not interfere with the ability of the hard hat to be properly inspected. Protective headgear must be worn with the bill facing forward, unless the government designated authority has determined and documented an exception for certain trades. No ball caps, knit caps, or other headdress shall be worn under the hard hat that could interfere with the fit or stability of the hard hat. Protective headgear and components shall be visually inspected daily for signs of damage. Headgear will be periodically inspected for ultraviolet degradation as evidenced by cracking or flaking. Drilling holes or in any way changing the integrity of the hard hat is prohibited. Personnel shall, as a minimum, wear safety-toed boots meaning American Society of Testing and Materials, or ASTM, standard F2413 while working on construction sites, unless it can be determined by an activity hazard analysis to the GDA's satisfaction that a different type of foot protection is required. Footwear providing protection against impact and compression hazards shall be rated as I-75 and C-75. High visibility apparel meeting at a minimum ANSI and ISEA 107 Performance Class 2 requirements shall be worn by workers whenever there is limited visibility of workers exposed to mobile or heavy equipment operations, vehicles, load handling, and other hazardous activities. Reduced visibility conditions exist due to weather conditions, illumination, or visually complex backgrounds where ambient visibility is at least 50 feet, and where workers are exposed to vehicular or equipment traffic at speeds up to 35 miles per hour. Class 3 high visibility apparel meeting ANSI ISEA 107 shall be worn for higher visibility by individuals such as signal persons, spotters, survey crews, inspectors, whenever reduced visibility conditions exist. New in the 2014 edition, workers are exposed to vehicular or equipment traffic in excess of 35 miles per hour. Workers are performing tasks which divert attention from approaching vehicular traffic. Workers are involved in activities in close proximity to vehicular traffic with no protective barriers. New in the 2014 edition, when working at night on or near sites where vehicle traffic is present, workers, such as but not limited to, signal persons, spotters, survey crews, and inspectors, shall wear, at a minimum, a Class 3 high visibility safety coverall or jumpsuit, or a Class 3 high visibility safety jacket and Class E high visibility pants or bib. Also new in the 2014 edition, if the use of high visibility apparel proves to create a greater hazard due to moving machinery, pinch points, heat stress, or other reasons, an AHA detailing rationale for infeasibility of use and alternate safety measures to be used to ensure same level of worker safety shall be developed, signed, and submitted by the responsible person and accepted by the GDA, supervisor, or the command's local safety and occupational health office. Work shall not commence until such acceptance has been obtained. The apparel background material shall be either fluorescent yellow-green, fluorescent orange-red, or fluorescent red. When choosing color, optimization of color conspicuity between the wearer and the work environment shall be considered. The use of respirators is required when occupational exposure levels exceed OSHA PEL or ACGIH TLVs and engineering or administrative controls are not feasible. The employer may allow the voluntary use of respirators, such as filtering face pieces, nuisance dust mask, in atmospheres that are not hazardous. Prior to use, the respirator must be evaluated and approved by the respirator program administrator to ensure that its use will in itself not create a hazard. The employee shall be instructed in the limitations of the respirator and the correct method of wearing and using the respirator. A written respiratory protection program shall be developed and implemented when respirators are used. A respirator program administrator must be assigned to manage the program. All employees using respirators, except employees using only filtering face pieces or dust masks, shall be included in the program. They shall be medically qualified, trained, and fit tested. The employer must establish and retain written information regarding medical evaluations, fit testing, and the respirator program. The following shall be made available upon request: a written copy of the current respirator program, records of medical approval, and fit test records including name of employee, type of fit test performed, specific make, model, style, and size of respirator tested, date of test, and pass or fail results. New in the 2014 edition, employers shall select and require employees to use appropriate hand protection when employees' hands are exposed to hazards, such as skin absorption of harmful substances, severe cuts, lacerations, or abrasions, punctures or sharp objects, chemical or thermal burns, harmful temperature extremes, or high hand vibration. Employers shall base the selection of the appropriate hand protection on evaluation of the performance characteristics of the hand protection relative to the task performed, the conditions present, the duration of use, and the hazards and potential hazards identified. Remember, one glove does not fit all jobs. Gloves should fit snugly. Gloves will be inspected thoroughly prior to use to assure that they are in good condition and will provide the protection required. Norfoil laminate resists permeation and breakthrough by an array of toxic and hazardous chemicals. Butyl provides the highest permeation resistance to gas or water vapors, frequently used in ketones and esters. Vitin is highly resistant to permeation by chlorinated and aromatic solvents. Nitrile provides protection against a wide variety of solvents, harsh chemicals, fats and petroleum products, and also provides excellent resistance to cuts, snags, punctures, and abrasions. Kevlar protects against cuts, slashes, and abrasions. Stainless steel mesh protects against cuts and lacerations. Persons working on electrical distribution systems shall be provided with appropriate electrical protective equipment. Rubber goods provided to protect employees who work on energized facilities must meet ASTM F18 standards. Electrical workers' rubber insulating protective equipment shall be visually inspected for damage or defects prior to each use. Rubber protective equipment must be subjected to periodic electrical tests. Rubber insulating gloves shall be inspected before first use and every 6 months thereafter. Rubber insulating blankets and sleeves shall be inspected before their first use and every 12 months thereafter. Electrical arc flash protection shall be provided for any person entering the flash protection boundary. Arc-rated clothing and PPE must be worn as determined by the incident exposure with the specific task. Refer to National Fire Protection Association 70E for specific hazard risk classifications and NFPA PPE category level chart for clothing and equipment requirements. Inherently buoyant Type 3, Type 4 work vests or better United States Coast Guard approved personal flotation devices shall be provided and properly worn in closed fashion by all personnel in the following circumstances: whenever there is a drowning hazard, on floating pipelines, pontoons, rafts, or stages, on structures or equipment extending or next to water, except where guardrail, personal fall protection systems, or safety nets are provided. Working alone at night where there are drowning hazards, in skiffs, small boats, or launches unless in an enclosed cabin. Automatic inflatable PFDs Type 5 or better, U.S. Coast Guard approved for commercial use, may be worn by workers in lieu of inherently buoyant PFDs, provided that PFDs are worn only by workers over 16 years of age and those who weigh 90 pounds or more, are designed, tested, and certified by the manufacturer for type of work being performed, and provide 30-pound minimum buoyancy post-deployment and shall have a status indicator window, and provided that personnel are trained in the use, maintenance, restrictions, care, storage, inspection, and post-deployment procedures. and they are worn at all times a drown hazard exists. All wearable PFDs shall be in international orange or orange red or ANSI 107 yellow-green color. Inherently buoyant PFDs shall have at least 31 square inches of retroreflective material on its front and at least 31 square inches on its backside. Auto-inflatable PFDs shall have at least 31 square inches of retroreflective material on its front and at least 31 square inches on its bladder to be visible when deployed. Each PFD shall be equipped with a U.S. Coast Guard approved automatically activated light. Lights are not required for PFDs on projects performed exclusively during daylight hours. Before and after each use, the PFD shall be inspected for defects that would alter its strength and buoyancy. On U.S. Coast Guard inspected vessels, ring buoys, or other throwable devices, Type 4 PFDs for example, are required to have automatic floating electric water lights. On all other floating plant or shore installations, lights on life rings are required only in locations where adequate general lighting is not provided. During construction activities, at least one skiff shall be immediately available at locations where employees work over or immediately next to water. Personnel trained in launching and operating the skiff shall be readily available during working hours. Life-saving personnel shall perform a life-saving drill, including launching and recovery of the skiff, before initiation of work at the site, and periodically thereafter, as specified by the GDA, but at least monthly or whenever new personnel are involved. Skiffs shall be kept afloat or ready for instant launching. Skiffs shall be equipped with 4 oars, 2 if the skiff is motor powered, oar locks attached to gunwales or the oars, 1 ballpoint boat hook, 1 ring buoy with 90 feet of solid braid polypropylene or equivalent line attached, PFDs in number equaling the skiff rating for maximum number of personnel allowed on board, and a fire extinguisher. In locations where waters are rough or swift, or where manually operated boats are not practical, a powerboat suitable for the waters shall be provided and equipped for life-saving. Skiffs and powerboats shall have buoyant material capable of floating the boat, its equipment, and the crew. On vessels without permanently mounted navigation lights, portable battery-operated navigation lights will be available and used for night operations.